All right. I think we're ready to get started. We've at least sort of resolved our chair situation, which let's just say it was a challenge. So that's my first apology. My second apology is this is the Emerging Leaders Roundtable, so I apologize for the small rectangular table that we have. So we're off to a great start, I think. The good news is we have a terrific panel of people who have accomplished a great deal early in their careers in government. And their agencies are very fortunate to have them, and we're very fortunate to have them with us today. We're calling them emerging leaders, but I don't think that really gives them enough credit for the accomplishments they've already had. So I think in many cases they've already emerged. But at any rate, I'll introduce you to each of them, and then we'll get started. I'll get the discussion started, but we'd like this to be just as open as possible, so we'll get to your questions just as soon as we can. To my right is Brandon Friedman, who is the Director of Online Communications for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Before joining the VA, Brandon was Vice Chair of VoteVets.org, and before that, he was an infantry platoon leader and executive officer in the Army's 101st Airborne Division, where he served combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq between 2001 and 2004. Those experiences resulted in the combat memoir, The War I Always Wanted. And I always like to ask panelists to tell me something that's not on their official bio. So in Brandon's case, he admitted he's addicted to the computer game Minesweeper, played 3 years of amateur baseball after leaving the Army, and both his wife and his cat are from Romania. But he had the cat first. That's a story you're going to have to ask him about later on, I guess. Story. Thank you, Brandon. Erica Navarro is Director of Strategic Planning and Performance Management at the Agency for International Development, where she serves as Budget Director for President Obama's Feed the Future initiative, the U.S. Global Hunger and Food Security Initiative. Before serving at USAID, Erica was Budget Director for the Millennium Challenge Corporation, a program examiner at the Office of Management and Budget, and a Peace Corps volunteer in Nicaragua. And not on her official bio, she's hiked 500 miles across Spain on the Camino de Santiago. If you saw the movie The Way last year, you know what that's all about. She also comes from a long line of civil servants and tried to escape that by getting her MBA. It didn't work. To her right is Bridget Roddy, who is the Virtual Student Foreign Service Program Manager in the State Department's Office of E-Diplomacy. Before that, she worked for almost 4 years in the department's Family Liaison Office. She's also worked at U.S. embassies in Ottawa and Vienna and the U.S. mission to the United Nations. And not on her official bio, she loves cooking, has a deaf and possibly albino dog named Shotzi, and spent the first 14 years of her life living overseas in the Ivory Coast, Austria, the Netherlands, and Taiwan. Thank you, Bridget. Moving down, Jackie Ross is Associate Director of the Recruitment Office at the Internal Revenue Service, where she manages its media branch. Her role includes oversight of strategic communications plans and the delivery of high-performance solutions to meet the agency's recruitment needs. She's led several agency efforts to incorporate social media into IRS outreach. And not on her official bio is the fact that she recently took a vacation in Reykjavik, Iceland, resulting in her repeatedly having to answer the question, why Iceland? She says she had a lovely time, even if it snowed on the first day of summer. And last but definitely not least, David Uegio. How close did I get?
Close.
I'm in the ballpark. Is lead for talent acquisition at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, where he heads up the new agency's efforts to recruit a world-class workforce. He also happens to be president of Young Government Leaders, the premier professional association for young public servants. And not on his official bio is the fact that he's an avid road and trail runner, wears minimalist shoes, though not today, to my deep disappointment, and completed his first 50K trail race in December. So someone who's still waiting to finish my first 50K in life, I'm impressed. So thank you very much to all of you. It's a great group, and we're eager to get their insights. I want to kick things off by asking a sort of general question of each of you. Maybe you could just take it in order. What drew you to public service? Why don't you start us off, Brandon?
Well, I kind of came to the government in sort of a roundabout way. What really drew me to public service in the first place was the military. And ever since I was a little kid, I got a photograph of myself. And this, I don't know, this is probably negative about our culture, but I've got a photograph of myself when I was 7 wearing all camouflage with a headband, carrying a rifle like Rambo. It's American life. But I always wanted to be in the military. Did that coming out of college. And after that, I went back to school. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Got a little involved in politics, and through that, realized that I wasn't totally helpless in how things worked in the country and how you can drive change. And through that, I got more involved and ended up getting hired to stand up this office at the Department of Veterans Affairs. My military background helped a little. But it's been great. It's been a great experience the last 3 years.
Great. Erica?
You already mentioned, but I'm third-generation government. So I grew up in Washington, D.C. Father was born in Washington, D.C. Both parents worked for the government. Grandparents worked for the government. So I tried to get away from that by going to business school. When it came to recruiting time, all of the issues just weren't as rich for me. And so when I was looking at coming back to Washington, D.C., I went to the Office of Management and Budget, which was a fabulous experience for me because I started working on housing finance issues. And then I was able to start working over on international affairs issues afterwards. And just the ability to move around on such diverse issues that affected the public was just very rewarding and amazing for me. So that's why I'm in the government.
Great. Bridget?
Well, similarly to Erica, my father was actually a foreign service officer, so I kind of grew up with the lifestyle of public service. But I actually didn't think I wanted a career in public service. I studied graphic design in college and thought I really wanted to kind of focus on that and move to New York and be a graphic designer. And I sort of realized that it just wasn't really happening, so I ended up kind of falling into public service, to be honest. But what I think has kept me here is finding a job, a position that I really am passionate about. I think that's something that's kind of always driven me when I've looked at work and what I want to do is passion. And so I think being able to find a job that I can still pursue what I'm passionate about in the government sector, I think is sort of what's kind of drawn and now kept me here.
And I'm in the same position. It's really more a matter of what's retained me in the government as opposed to what attracted me, other than the fact that passion is contagious. I got laid off in the private sector. I moved to Washington, D.C. from Oklahoma, and my one desire was to get out. I apologize to Oklahomans in advance of Oklahoma. I just wanted to sort of explore. And a lot of the folks in the organization, I worked at a biotech that were laid off, were just flocking to EPA. So everybody told me, you've got to apply for these internships, for these federal internships. And that's how I ultimately joined the IRS. I've been there for 9.5 years because the opportunities have just kept coming. And so that's really been really fulfilling for me.
Sure. My story is a little bit circuitous, I guess. I, in undergraduate work, studied history and liberal arts and was very interested in public service. I was an Eagle Scout coming in. And I was fortunate enough to catch the tail end of the tech bubble, so I got a job that I was not necessarily qualified for, but was adept at, kind of managing IT infrastructure in Santa Barbara, California, where I'd gone to undergrad. And so I was pretty much on what I would term working vacation for about 5 or 6 years in Santa Barbara, where I did my IT job and was happy to live in Santa Barbara. And then 9/11 happened. And I sort of had a revelation that I, though happy in my existence, wasn't necessarily contributing to society in the way that I had intended to when I had gone to college. That led me to look at different graduate programs, found a program at a school in the Midwest that had a joint journalism and Master's of Public Policy degree. So I figured, hey, I'll try that. So I tried journalism for about a year and found that I didn't like people editing my work down, which is ironic now. But
be careful there as an editor.
But decided that the public affairs piece was nevertheless intriguing. So I applied to a bunch of schools, went to the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, because I figured it would be a good opportunity to not be a lifelong Californian. Even though I love California, I think that there's a tremendous potential for people to live their entire life there in almost an alternate reality. And so that led me to the Presidential Management Fellowship Program, which led me out to the National Institutes of Health, which is why I'm now sitting here, basically working for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and speaking to that kind of lateral mobility and the ability to shift sectors drastically to improve kind of the American condition. That's definitely what keeps me involved in public service.
Great. As a native Minnesotan, it is inconceivable to me that someone would move from Santa Barbara to Minnesota. But we won't address that. I want to get straight to the heart of the question that I think comes up a lot. We hear a lot in government about generations and generation. I take it you get this from time to time. So I'm interested to know, from your perspective, are there characteristics of your generation as a whole? If so, what are you people looking for?
We were actually chatting a little bit about this beforehand, about this seeming trend towards really over-characterizing folks into generations. There was actually a really great article on the Executive Coach blog on GovExec about how we need more Gen Y leaders. And I read through it going, oh, this is interesting. What are we suggesting Gen Y leaders can bring to the table as opposed to Gen X leaders like myself and baby boomer leaders that I've worked for? And the idea was that organizations need to be more flat because people want an opportunity for autonomy and they want the ability to actually enable change. I mean, some of the things that we've heard from our panel members today. But what I've seen in the reading that I've done is that it doesn't take a millennial or a Gen Y-er to bring about that kind of management manifesto. So I think that we are seeing some trends and that younger people, Gen Ys, millennials, even Gen Xers like myself, are demanding an opportunity to make a change and to have a voice in the kinds of decisions that are made in our organizations because we see an opportunity to do great things with that power. But I don't think that that's necessarily unique to our generation. I think that when I look at a lot of the mentors that I've had in my career at IRS and elsewhere, a lot of the advice that I've received from the baby boomers is you're going to get to a place where this is what you're going to expect. I think we're just getting there maybe a little bit sooner.
Anybody else have perspective on the generational question?
I think people will talk about how the younger generation expects to telework and be more mobile and not be tied to a desk. I don't know if it's kind of a chicken-egg question. I'm not sure if it's because that's the generation's viewpoint or if it's that the technology is sort of just driving the change and you've got a generation that sort of just grew up with it and it's natural to not necessarily be tied to a desk. So I don't know.
We just went through a space reconfiguration in my bureau where everything is, there's no cubes anymore, and people hate it. The younger generation hates it.
Really?
So I do think that there is this tendency to generalize folks and say that they don't want structure. I think there's a lot of I see a lot of 13s and 14s and 12s really looking for direction, really looking for not only how can I advance my career, but where, I need some advice on my skill set and really getting that skill set, you need to go over here, you need to think about these options. I don't see that happening for those folks. So I think that's a little bit of the angst that I see on a daily basis.
I guess to take a little bit different spin on it, I think that when I see analysis of generational issues, it's very often oriented towards personality traits in a way that I find to be very superficial. And I think rather than look at it just from that lens, exclusively from that lens, that it's perhaps more valuable to look at the sort of experiential things that are going on for young people today. I think that certainly through the recession, there is kind of a quiet depression of employment for people between the ages of 16, 24, 25. I think that when you look at studies that are released on public trust, we're finding that trust in all institutions, not just the government, but both public and private sectors, is down in its sort of totality. And I think that's reflective of a very difficult experience those people are having in the job market. So rather than sort of just focus on this sort of high-level caricature about personality traits, we might be better served by looking at kind of what is the experience like for young people in America right now, and are there opportunities for government to shape and benefit from that instead?
And I think also along those lines too is, what tools, how can we make the work environment, how can we make sure that people coming in have the tools that they need or are looking for in order to do their job? So how can we, better equip people with their individual needs, not just categorizing on personality, but sort of, what is your experience? What are you looking for? What, at your desktop, what kind of things do you need? And also, I think providing sort of the mentorship kind of feedback role as well, in addition to technology issues, also sort of that, looking at personality and mentorship and stuff, and kind of combining all that together.
Is there a bigger distinction than between generations? Is there a bigger distinction between people who choose to work in government and those who don't? Do you see that play out?
There was an article, somebody sent it around this morning, I don't know if you saw it, it was in the Atlantic, and it was about how in the 1960s and 70s there was a big push for elite young people to go into government, go into public service and do public policy. And now the younger generation, those who want to be entrepreneurs and innovators, have been drawn sort of to the Silicon Valley crowd. And the article was about how that's sort of sucking the life out of public service. And I read the article this morning on the way into work, and a lot of it sort of rang true to me. It doesn't seem to be as prestigious to me today to have some of these government positions as I feel like it used to be. And now it's all about who can come up with who can come up with Pinterest, or who can come up with the next Facebook, and go out to Silicon Valley and get $200 million in venture capital, and I don't know if that's necessarily a good place for us to be. The guy who was being interviewed in the article sort of made a persuasive case, but I thought that was an interesting take on sort of a generational difference in how things are going now.
To sort of build on that, I did a detail down at the Office of Personnel Management last summer, sort of evaluating the Presidential Management Fellows Program, which is touted as the government's premier leadership development program. And through the course of my research, I interfaced with a gentleman from the government of Singapore, which is really regarded as sort of the platinum standard of civil service systems. And by contrast and comparison, in Singapore, civil service is the preeminent career, right? People that fail to become civil servants become engineers. And it's really just a very different kind of look at it. And they also have this accelerated internship program that's quite novel. It's extremely competitive. The gentleman sort of scoffed at the level of preciseness associated with the way we assess talent over here. But he basically indicated that people are brought on post-undergrad into that program, and within 4 to 6 years, they are either on path for SES equivalency or they're just out, which is a much different way of looking at kind of talent acquisition.
Well, all of you have sort of answered this call to public service. Are there, in achieving what you have set out to achieve for yourselves, what are the frustrations that you encounter? Everybody speak at once.
I know.
Where do we start?
The IRS commissioner is going to be here at lunch, right? So I have to
Not here yet, though.
Not here yet. Okay. Oh, well, there you go. I recently shared an article with my staff, actually, trying to sort of inspire and motivate them. It's one of the things that we do a lot. We share readings and sort of try and cheer each other on. I cannot pronounce this guy's last name, I'm embarrassed to say, but it's William D. It's a really great speech about solitude and leadership. It was a graduation speech, I think, in 2009 to the West Point graduates. So you can find it online. It's a really great piece. I'll spell his name for you after the session here today. But he talks about how in the United States today we no longer have a real emphasis on training leaders. It kind of speaks to what you're talking about. They were training people to sort of support the status quo, and that we have a responsibility as leaders to challenge that status quo. I read that. It's a long article, but it's a very worthwhile article. And I really identified with it, which is the reason I shared it, obviously. So I think that's probably been one of the challenges for me. For every opportunity that the agency has provided me, there's also been a lot of challenge or frustration in trying to win folks over, build social capital, get people to identify with the ideas that I bring to the table. But at events like this, we just heard from a really great speaker in the innovation series who talks about new tools that you can use to help identify opportunities for innovation by avoiding thinking of it as a confrontational sort of relationship between bureaucrats and innovators, which was really powerful for me. So as I continue in the organization, I continue to sort of network with other great leaders and other great folks to identify tools that help me overcome those challenges. But the bureaucracy, having come from the private sector, has probably been the biggest challenge.
I would talk about the personnel system. Organizations are built on leadership, and they're built on talented, quality individuals. And if you can get people like that, the sky's the limit on what you can do in your organization. In the federal system, you're very restricted in how you can move people, hiring and firing. And I'm not sure it's very frustrating for us. Sometimes we know there's a person out there who wants to serve in government and we can't get them in. Other times there may be a person who's not as productive as we might wish them to be, and would like to maybe move them on to a greener pasture somewhere, and we can't you can't get rid of them. And so a lot of times you have to play the hand you're dealt. You come into an organization and this is your team and you got to make it work. I think that's and obviously it's sort of inefficient by design. That's that's the way the system was built. But I think the way that things have progressed so quickly in the private sector, especially with technology and social media and everything, there's sort of this expectation that things move quicker now than they used to, and the federal government, I don't think, has really kept up with that. And so I think with respect to federal hiring, there has to be reform, and there has to be a way that you can come in and build small teams that can really take action and get things done in these large monolithic bureaucracies. And it's the thing that I see that is most unfortunate is sometimes you can get really talented people that can come in and they can really make headway, and they can bang their head against the wall and really knock down walls and really make things happen. But it takes so much effort in the federal government to make something happen that people who are really talented will tend to burn out fairly quickly. And so what you see is that people who are really talented will come in and they'll make they'll achieve a modicum of change and they'll make it happen, but then they'll move on. They'll move back to the private sector, whereas the people who are not necessarily desired in the private sector are the ones that continue on. And so it's I think this is the age-old problem of federal service. I don't think this is anything new, but I think it's I think the way that the private sector works these days, I think it's made it a little more problematic and a little more frustrating probably for the younger generation.
Do others see that too? Are there other frustrations that?
I would say one thing that I've noticed is, in general, sort of a lack of communication between federal agencies. And I'm sure, we have a really talented workforce, but how do we identify someone in another agency who might be working on the same issue you are, or who might be innovating in a way that you want to? And for me, it's frustrating to try to figure out, well, who's out there, who's doing what I'm doing, or what I'm trying to do, and kind of identifying who those people are. So I think it's almost, and this, again, is a problem that's been going on for a while, is, lack of communication. And it's interesting. I was interviewed actually for a GovExec article about a new program we're launching with microtasking. And from this article, a bunch of agencies have contacted me saying, oh, it's really cool what you're doing, but they wouldn't have known about it unless the article was out there. So it's like I've been trying to share what we're doing, but until an outside publication actually wrote about what we're doing, then other government agencies took notice. So it's just kind of, for me, frustrating to identify the people who maybe you want to reach out to, you want to be in contact with, that are working on similar issues. And so how can we kind of do that better?
So you're saying Government Executive Magazine is the key to this?
That's right. Get an article in Government Executive Magazine, and there you go.
It's a topic that kind of brings all of the things we've been talking about together, though, and the younger employees generally have access to better tools in their personal and private spaces than they do in their professional spaces. So on Facebook, if you're going on a vacation to Reykjavik, you can post it on there and say, is anybody else gone? Where are you going? What kinds of things do you recommend to do? But in our professional spaces, we have a lack of access to those same kinds of productivity tools, which can be frustrating.
Yeah. All right. We'll want to get to your questions, give you a chance to interact with the panel. So anyone, we have microphones and they'll come around.
Well, being retired from the government, I watched the retirement system change and move to FERS. And the real selling point on that was that people could come in and out of government, and their piece of retirement would be protected. Do you all see yourselves moving out into the private sector for a few years and then coming back into government? What are your thoughts on that, or are you now dug in for the long term?
I plan to move out into the private sector at some point. It's probably just my personality. I don't think I can do something for more than a few years. I tend to want to get in, try to make some change, try to do some good stuff, and then I just feel there's so many experiences out there that I don't have that I think would make me more effective as a leader. For instance, I think working in the private sector, when you work with government, it's good to have government experience and vice versa. As I work in government and I collaborate with contractors in the private sector, I feel like there's a gap there because I worked in the nonprofit sector, I worked in the military, worked in the federal government. I feel like I would probably be a more effective leader if I had some private sector experience that I could bring back to the government, because I think you learn a lot doing that. So I very easily could see myself moving in between, going out into the private sector for a few years, and then maybe coming back into the government.
So I actually think that it's not an entirely helpful organizing principle to think by sector. So I had previously been at the National Institutes of Health, right, which is a very established, generally excellently well-regarded place to work, and in some ways, moving to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, I actually feel like I am in the private sector, even though it's a public sector entity. Given our we're a startup, we're 11 months old, we're directly tasked with overseeing giant firms, about $12 trillion worth of the economy. So to me, it's not necessarily that I'm going to move back, in my case, to the private sector just to check the box. I'm much more interested in wherever I can have the most impact. Now, if that's in the private sector, that's where you'll find me. But I don't know that it has to be that way.
Hi. In terms of the federal hiring process, your experiences with it, did it take a long time? Was it frustrating? What were some of the things you encountered when you started the process of getting hired into the government?
It's all about people. It's all about who you know. I mean, I didn't go through the PMF program, but I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, both public and private sector. I was hired in pretty quickly to OMB once I figured out that I wasn't supposed to be talking to HR, that I was supposed to be talking to the deputy assistant director, and all I needed was the org chart to figure out who that person was. And so that's how I got hired in. And then since that, every single one of my jobs has been through knowing someone. I have not. USAID jobs, I will, obviously you have to go in and log in and submit your resume that way, but finding out the really good nuggets, or really good opportunities out there has been through contacts that I've known at OMB, my MBA, my agencies that I worked with.
I would be curious, did anybody in here get a job just by applying randomly on USA Jobs?
Wow.
Okay, that's good. So the system is not totally broken.
But I think it can be frustrating, though, for people that are trying to get their foot in the door, because you have to start at a GS, a certain level. You can't just, in most cases, jump into a GS 12 or 13 position. So I think it can be, kind of how do I get my foot in the door if I don't know people? If I'm starting out, how do I, network, or do I go to different conferences, and how do I get my foot in the door? And so I think, in my case, my very first position with the State Department was because of experience that I had living and working overseas that made me qualified for the position that I applied for. But the one that I currently have, it was one of those, day before the position closed on USA Jobs, I applied for it and thinking, okay, I have no shot in getting this. But I think it just really shows the importance in, spending time with your application and with your statement of interest and really focusing on, the quality of your application. And it's not just, I'm going to click send a resume. It's really focusing on the work that you've done and how you can really, highlight what you've achieved.
I was really struck by how you talked earlier, how in past generations, the younger generation was sort of built up to go into the public sector, and that was like what they aspired to be. Because theoretically, those young people are now the ones leading the government, and they either are not making it, they're just deliberately not making it appealing to today's young people, or they like don't know how. And I would ask, why do you think that the people running the government now, who were recruited when they were young, most of them, wouldn't see such a thing as enough of a priority to do major changes in the bureaucracy?
It's a powerful question. Wow. In my experience, I've seen a lot of the really instrumental leaders at the IRS move on after retiring or after a successful career. They've done exactly what we've talked about. They've seen opportunities to create change in the private sector, and they've moved on. So unfortunately, I think what happens in some scenarios, I don't think anybody's trying to make the federal service an unappealing place, but I think unfortunately sometimes the folks that are left behind are maybe not the folks that have the vision and the passion any longer. They've become really comfortable where they're at, and that doesn't mean they can't be reinvigorated and re-excited. I wish I had a better answer than that.
Oh, that's good. Question over here. Just trying to get both sides of the room.
Hi, I wanted to address the young man's question over there. The Partnership for Public Service has an excellent program called the Call to Serve, which invigorates young people that are within a few years of being in the federal service to go out to college campuses and do recruitment and promote public service. And the Partnership for Public Service does work on a lot of they do the best places to work in the federal government, and they work in concert with a lot of OPM studies and reports, and even done some really cool marketing pieces on OPM's website about how it's cool to work for different federal agencies. It's for several years now. Our agency, which is the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the Department of Labor, has an alliance with the partnership to recruit students, young people with disabilities, and it's been a really great relationship. I'm very happy to say I brought the partnership to my agency.
No, but the IRS Recruitment Office works really closely with the partnership. They do outstanding outreach to help promote federal service. And they really provide great information not only for folks who are interested in federal service, but current federal employees. Their most recent publication is a little bit sad for federal leaders. It's showing that I think it's 51.6% of current federal employees have trust in their leadership, specifically their senior leadership. But it's through reporting and analytics and data like that that helps us pinpoint issues so that we can work to resolve and solve them. They do great work.
Just to build on that really quickly, I do think that, and I work in talent acquisition, it's all I do all day long. I think it's a misnomer to think that calibrating the marketing strategy around public service is going to fix this. To me, it's not so much making the promise, it's so much, as delivering on the promise through the employee experience, which is a much more nuanced and difficult issue to tackle.
Question over here.
I know earlier we were talking about the age differences, and although Dave, you said it's a superficial thing, it does exist. And as emerging leaders, I see you all right in the middle. So we have the older workforce, and not necessarily age-wise, but just in the way that they do business. And you have the younger folks who are coming in, who are innovative, who are thinking outside the box, who live in the cloud. What tactics do you all employ to bring those two worlds together and still deliver the mission?
There's a lot of social science out there. Dan Pink has been a really inspirational person for me in reading his writings. And what he suggests is that internal motivation is where you really inspire people to excellence. When you identify what it is inside of them that really gets them fired up and passionate about things. And the interesting thing about that social science, and there's decades of research and studies that show this through data, is that it doesn't matter if you're 50 or if you're 15. If you can identify that internal motivation in a staff as a leader, you're going to really excel in the results that you're able to deliver for your organization. So that's really what I strive to do by, encouraging my staff, expecting my staff, demanding that my staff exercise autonomy and ownership over their programs, and developing really trusting relationships. It's no longer command and control, which is sort of relevant to the baby boomers, right? It's collaborative and really teamwork driven. I really focus on results. And the interesting thing is when you take that approach, you're able to pull the results out of your staff no matter if they're all baby boomers or if you have a mix or they're all younger. The social science supports it, and my personal experience does as well.
I think one thing that's important too is to have a really diverse office and workforce, whether it's within your, your bureau we have at State Department or your specific office, is having people that are, in our case, foreign service, civil service, contractors, people of all different ages, all different backgrounds, because I think the more then that you work as a team together towards something, you can better understand the different personalities of people that you're working with, which then helps you better understand maybe within your organization, other people that you may have to, be working with. And I think one thing at the State Department, I'm sure a lot of agencies have this too, is we have a mentorship program. And I think, unfortunately, it's not taken advantage of as much as it could be. I have not participated in it, I admit, but I definitely do rely on people in my office that have been in the government for much longer than I have to sort of figure out a lot of the bureaucracy. And I may have an approach that I think is the right one, but that's not the right one. So I really do rely on going to these people and saying, hey, I have this idea, is this the right approach? So I think knowing the strengths of different people in your office, too, is important, who you can go to for, what type of task or challenge you might have.
Can I say one? I think this idea that you have to sit in your current role for 5 or 10 years, and then you get to progress to SES or this level, I just think it kills the government. And I know a lot of 60 and 70-year-old old Fed exec, retirees, and they are wonderful. They're the ones that are telling me, you need to move on now. This is not going to work for you. You need to, go to this agency, or you need to know this person and move over this way. So I think that sort of categorizing it as one group or one age wants to do it this way versus another, I don't think that's going to work. And I also think with millennials and Generation X, the telling folks that if they have to sit there in their position and hang out for 5 or 10 years is what's going to drive them away immediately. And it's a big disservice to the federal government because we lose all that experience.
I think there's, and I'll just say this briefly, I think there's this propensity in the government a lot of times out of expediency to value experience over talent. And so one of the things we talk about is the best way to get ahead in government is to get old, to just stick around and you will move up. And no matter how talented you are, if you're in your 20s, you're not going to be in a senior level position. And a lot of times, most of the time that makes sense because most of the time somebody in their 20s doesn't have the breadth of experience that's going to allow them to take on large projects. But, in our organization, it almost seems like it's out of the question. And so that's something I have a bit of an issue with.
Well, I'll be brief, but to sort of contrast that with the private sector experience, I was at a conference about innovation and creativity not long ago with a guy, Diego Rodriguez, who's a partner at IDEO, and he's also on the faculty of the Stanford Design School. And he basically indicated that he's not terribly impressed by rote years of experience, but rather, with the breadth of a person's experience, he'd much rather hire somebody with 6 years of experience rather than somebody with 22 years of repeating the same year of experience.
Right.
Back here.
I have a question as it related to both acquisition and retention, which we touched on a little bit. What are your agencies doing to encourage career exploration at various stages in an individual's career so that they can potentially see options, they can see different tracks that they may not have considered when they were studying graphic design? Could you just touch on some of those things?
I think it happens, you have foreign service as well. I think it happens for the foreign service employees, but for civil service, I'm not sure if it's just because of the agencies in which you're having that dichotomy of different employee status. There's nothing. There's very little. I mean, and training-wise, I just went to FEI, the Federal Executive Institute, for their SES class, and that was the first training I had had since I started in the government 7 years ago, it was a wonderful experience. I loved it, but I just had been wondering why did it take 7 years to get that experience. So.
I think it varies a lot from agency to agency. The IRS has actually invested quite a bit in that area. Yeah. There are a lot of career maps. There's a great mentoring program that's really blossomed in the last couple of years. So there are a lot of resources available to IRS employees, including tons and tons of training at which you're going to be networking and connecting with others. Budgetary constraints have restricted a lot of that, so it's now e-learning, but we continue to supplement that with online services and tools where you can say, right now I'm a 201 grade 7, I'd like to be a 343 grade 15. How do I do that? And it actually maps you out and shows you the competencies. So different agencies are investing in different ways in that, and that's part of the importance of doing your research and learning which organization's culture is going to be the best fit for you.
But it always seems like you have to do it yourself.
You do.
You always have to find these things out by yourself, and that's what I find disappointing, because I think there's a lot of people that are high achievers that can figure this stuff out, and I think there's the people that are right underneath it that just need a little push. And I don't see that happening.
I was just going to say it's totally up to the individual to find out what those opportunities are. But I think one thing that's cool, at least in civil services, we're encouraged to kind of go on unofficial sort of like rotation kind of things, like maybe a detail in an office for a couple weeks. So you're not officially assigned to a different office, but maybe you'd like to go and learn about what this office is doing. And so I think the more that supervisors and managers can encourage employees to do that and to find a way to make it happen, and maybe to even help identify, I've seen you've really taken an interest in this area. Did you know that this office might be a cool place for you to spend a couple weeks? So I think having unofficial sort of details on different offices is a great way for new people, or people that have been in government for a while even, to find out sort of what other opportunities are out there within your organization or even across agencies as well.
I think we have time for one more question. In the back?
I see also right now we're having a huge influx of veterans coming back who actually have a lot of the mindset, the skills, ability to do more with less, ability to innovate, ability to kick butt and take names when needed, with people who don't even speak their own language, which federal government employees can sometimes have that problem in their offices. So I'm wondering, do you have any veteran hiring initiatives? Are you seeing an influx of perhaps veterans coming into your offices? Can Brandon maybe speak to any opportunities to really... we have, a high unemployment rate for veterans. We have a lot of government offices who kind of need the skill set that our veterans have. How are you maybe making those connections happen?
Yep. Well, as you mentioned, the unemployment rate for young veterans is higher than the general population. It's actually lower for older veterans than the general population. But one of the things you can take advantage of is if a veteran is 30% disabled by DOD or VA or more, you can hire them non-competitively. So we've actually gotten a couple of people in that way. We're the Department of Veterans Affairs, so obviously we're very keen on hiring veterans. But I've hired 4 people since I've been there for my staff, and I've hired 3 veterans, and everyone else in my office has made we've made a conscious effort to go out and hire veterans. 1, because it's being pushed because of the unemployment rate. 2, because we've got that link to the military. And 3, because like you said, I think a lot of federal agencies could stand to learn a lot from the skills that people in the military bring, which is a different way of thinking, and sort of people are results oriented and sort of driven and don't want to be held back by bureaucracy. They have a mission, they want to get it accomplished, and by God, they're going to go do it. And so, we've really tried to get out and hire quite a few veterans in our organization. I don't know if anybody else has.
I'm very proud, and I'm so excited to hear your really positive spin on hiring veterans, because we really like to promote that at the IRS. I'm very proud that the IRS, even though we are not a federal agency, we're a Bureau, whatever it is. We're under Treasury. And within the IRS, we actually manage the veteran hiring program for all the Treasury bureaus because we did such a good job of it. And we actually, I believe we're very close to meeting, if we haven't already exceeded the federal mandates for hiring veterans and disabled veterans. So we have a really specialized and targeted program where we're not only educating veterans about their rights under special hiring authorities, but veteran spouses. We're also educating employers, the folks that are doing the hiring about why it's important to hire veterans and why it's not just a federal mandate, but it's going to make your organization better and hear all the benefits. So we do a lot within the IRS for the entire Department of the Treasury to make that successful. It's a very big initiative for us, along with diverse hiring for Schedule A applicants, those employees that can join us under special hiring authorities for disabilities, targeted disabilities, and then just general diversity. So we're very committed to that at the IRS.
And I think just similarly, we're very fortunate in that our mission of investigation and examination tends to fit very well with the skill sets veterans are bringing back in terms of evaluating an ambiguous situation. So currently, just under 10% of our workforce is veteran, and we expect that to continue.
Great. Well, I think we could go on all day with this, but then we wouldn't get to have lunch. So that would be a tragedy. But I want to thank everybody on the panel, and I want to say, as a taxpayer, don't get burned out. If you do leave, come back, because your agencies need you, your government needs you, more importantly, your country needs you. But thank you all for sharing your insights today.